we didn't belong was something that was felt every day.
שאנחנו לא שייכים, היא הייתה תחושה יומיומית.
Despite protests, most Polish universities permitted a ghetto bench policy initiated by student groups requiring Jews to sit apart. National Democratic and fascist students incited violence against Jews. If they could attend classes at all, most Jewish students stood in protest.
I had a friend, Vanda, by the name of Vanda, who was not Jewish. So we went to university and we both stood in the back of the auditorium. And when the class was over, a group of students came. They were all men, and they said, "Why are you standing here?" So I said, "I'm standing because I'm Jewish." And Vanda said, "I'm standing because I'm Polish." That enraged them. I think that they were more enraged by Vanda than by me. They expected me to stand. So they beat us up. There were 6 or 7 of them. And they sort of started hitting us. It was a horrible feeling because there was nobody who would come to our rescue. I didn't believe that anti-Semitism was somehow native to Poland. I thought it is a political issue, economical issue, and that once we have different set of politics, well, there will be no anti-Semitism.
The Polish government proposed a ban on ritual slaughter for kosher meat. The Jewish community united in protests led by the Bund.
We felt the religious Jews have a right to live their own way. And the Bund called for demonstrations. It was March 17, I remember, 1937. Thousands of Jews, not only Bundists, but also religious people, came out in the streets to protest.
It affected everybody. I mean, the boycott affected the boycott and all the other, and the growing anti-Semitism, which was partly imported from Nazi Germany, affected every one of us.
The Bund struggle against anti-Semitism increased its support among the Jews. In the 1938 city elections, an alliance between the Bund and the Polish Socialist Party gained socialist majorities in Warsaw, Krakow, and major cities across Poland. But the faint glimmer of Jewish-Polish solidarity had arrived too late. The German population of Danzig was already waiting for Hitler. In Warsaw, young Jewish socialists put their faith in humanity.
We were part of a big movement, and we were sure that one day that better world that we sang about, wir kommen on, we are coming, we are here. It wasn't just words. We all felt it, that it's near.
The Second World War began in Europe with the German attack on Poland on September 1st, 1939. German bombs brought devastation and death to the people of Poland. Warsaw was a battle zone.
It was the 6th day of the war. It was a Friday in September 6th. Many houses and streets were burning. About 11 o'clock, I could manage to get through to the office of the newspaper where I worked, the Bundesdaily, the Volkszeitung. And as soon as I got there, I saw one of the Bundesleaders and one of the editors, Victor Alter, came down and he said, Jossel, you know, we are leaving, we are going. I said, where? Where, Herr Alter, where are we going? He said, we're going to Lublin. We are going to publish the newspaper there. We're going to open a front against the invading German army. I worked for about 3 weeks.
The speed and force of the German attack brought chaos. As refugees straggled into Warsaw, the Polish authorities ordered able-bodied men to leave the city. More than 100,000 fell back to the east, hoping to regroup against the Nazi advance. But in the east, another invasion shocked the nation. The Soviet Red Army marched into Poland on September 17th. A Nazi-Soviet pact had taken Poland off the map. In the German-occupied zone, the new Nazi governor, Hans Frank, declared, "From now on, the political role of the Polish nation is ended. Neither the Republic nor any other form of Polish state will ever be reborn." The Germans rounded up potential leaders, politicians, doctors, teachers, priests. First they were imprisoned and then killed. The Nazi plan was to enslave Poland. The German minority in Poland aided the Nazis, pointing the finger at patriotic Poles who might continue the struggle against Nazi domination. After 3 weeks of fighting, Warsaw fell to the invaders. As Germans distributed food, they urged Poles to identify Jews among the hungry.
הייתה לי אחות קטנה.
I had a smaller sister, and I had to get her something to eat.
חייב להביא לה משהו לאכול. ונעמדתי בתור.
And I stood in the queue, and a German came, together with a Pole, who pointed out, "There is a Jew," since the Germans didn't know how to distinguish the Jews.
להפריד.
And they threw me from the queue and said that this soup wasn't for Jews. This was on the second or third day after the Germans entered Warsaw.
זה היה ביום השני או השלישי שהגרמנים נכנסו לוורשה.
Orthodox Jews were easily recognized by the Germans because of their beards and distinctive dress. They became immediate targets of sadistic torment. Thousands were humiliated and killed. Late in November 1939, the Germans decreed that all Jews must display the Star of David on their clothing. Their Jewish identity was visible to all.
My mother said, let's save those things, because after the war, I am going to, if I have money, to put up diamonds in the star, gold in the star, and to wear it on every holiday, on every Sabbath, to remember that we had to wear it.
The Germans appointed Jewish councils charged with carrying out Nazi orders. Shmuel Ziegelboim, a Bundist leader in Warsaw, urged that the orders be disobeyed. But Jews were moved into areas of containment, and large numbers were conscripted to work for the Nazis. Resistance seemed impossible. Some chose cooperation. Most hoped their usefulness would protect them. Dąbrowa Górnicza, where these Jews labored, lay 20 miles north of a town called Auschwitz. In the Soviet zone of occupation, the communists were imposing their new order, redistributing land to local peasants.
As a child, I remember coming one day home, and there was this lady in the house, and I asked who she was. And she was a representative of the Communist Party, a local Jewish girl that was stationed in her house, and she was walking around like a jailer with a set of keys all around her, and there were locks on all of our closets in the house and all of the businesses outside of the house. And anything that we wanted from our closets, she would go and open it if she decided that indeed we needed it. My mother's fur coats and other luxury items of the bourgeoisie.
The Soviets deported more than 1 million Poles to labor camps in Siberia and elsewhere. Thousands died. For Jews, however, those who were deported and survived were among the few Polish Jews to survive the war. In the German zone, often with only 2 or 3 days' notice, Jews were compelled to move into areas of containment. Non-Jewish Poles were forced out. Orthodox Jews, converts to Christianity, Jews of other nations, the Germans made no distinction. Containment became imprisonment. The Jews of Warsaw were ordered to construct walls of brick and barbed wire. The penalty for leaving the ghetto without permission was death. By November 1940, almost 500,000 people were locked inside.
The first occupants of the Warsaw ghetto were the Jews who lived in Warsaw. After a short while, they started to bring Jews in from neighborhood villages and towns. So the ghetto became very crowded, and there were no accommodation for those people, and they were dying from sickness and hunger.
Children caught smuggling or outside the ghetto in search of food were often shot on the spot. Others were brought to the ghetto prison by the Jewish police. German rations allowed Poles 669 calories daily. It meant hunger. Jews were allowed only 184. They starved.
We lived like animals, but they, poor things, lived. No animal could live like those unhappy Jews lived. It was impossible to survive on official rations. And where did people get the money from if they didn't work? They sold their possessions. They sold everything they had before the war. At the markets, Poles from the Aryan side came in, either on forged papers or legal passes, and paid next to nothing for these things. And with this money, the Jews bought bread.
To survive, the community depended on large-scale smuggling through sentry posts. Guards were bribed and profits made by Germans, Poles, and Jews. Small-scale smuggling through chinks in the wall might provide bread or a few vegetables. Every day, children risked their lives.
At a certain moment, a little boy, who didn't realize that this huge German is standing there, tries to get into the ghetto through this window, so to speak. Naturally, he can't, because these potatoes are holding him back. And then this German starts to kick the little boy. He kicks that little bottom, that poor bottom, you see, driving the child in so hard that it couldn't get out either this way or that.
Wbił to dziecko tak w ten, że on ani w tę stronę, ani w tę wyjść nie mógł. Niemiec za rewolwer I strzelił.
The German grabbed his revolver and fired and finished him off. The Germans could keep the potatoes. They didn't get to the Jews.
האמת היא שלא חשבנו בהתחלה על ההתנגדות.
The truth is, at the beginning, we didn't think about resistance. We just thought how to keep an image of humanity as Jews, how to pass the war without the war destroying us.
בלי שהמלחמה תשבור אותנו.
And Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto, with all its problems and with its hunger, and Jews still kept up their religious life. They kept it very much alive. I even married in the Warsaw Ghetto. The fact is that many Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto married. They married because they had hope. And especially Orthodox Jews had that hope. Jews who believed in God felt, and they felt, that this cannot be forever, and that evil can't last forever.
When German forces invaded eastern Poland and the Soviet Union in June 1941, hope for an early end to the war faded. With the German tanks came special killing squads, the Einsatzgruppen, whose targets were the 4 million Jews in the newly conquered territories. Centuries-old Jewish communities of the East were systematically terrorized. Whole communities were murdered.
On September 26, 25 and September 26, among the people of Vyshishki, among the 4,000 Jews that were executed by the Einsatzgruppen and the Lithuanian and Poles, were members of my family, all my uncles, all my father's brothers, all my mother's brothers were killed on September 25, my 2 grandmothers, and all my aunts and all my cousins, all of them born in Eishishok, all of them that our family lived there for hundreds and hundreds of years. All of them were killed in these 2 days.
The Nazis decided to kill all European Jews. Almost half of them lived in Poland. Centers for mass killing were constructed. Helmno, Treblinka, Sobibor, Majdanek, Belzec, Auschwitz. All were open and operating by the summer of 1942.
In the summer of 42, the Germans put signs all over the ghetto that whoever wants to go to a labor camp, where they will be safe, clothed, and fed, but they will have to work for the Germans. A lot of people who were very poor did this because they thought this will be a better alternative from what they had until now.
Musicie Państwo zrozumieć, że człowiek nie wierzy w to.
You must understand that the human being does not believe that suddenly 400,000 or 500,000 people are killed for no reason at all. He doesn't believe. In any case, people said if they were taking us to our death, they wouldn't give us 3 kilos of bread and jam, would they? Why would they give food to people who are going to die in a few hours? So at about 4 or 5 o'clock, there was always an empty freight train, and the 8,000 or 10,000 people who had been assembled were put in the wagons. About 100 people were crammed into each truck, and eventually, when the train was full, there were 20-odd wagons packed tight with people. The train moved, whistled, and left for Treblinka. There was a deathly silence in that place. Those people did not scream. It was terribly quiet there. So quiet, it's difficult to imagine.
Byłam po aryjskiej stronie I wtopiłam się.
I was on the Aryan side, and I had melted into the Polish community, pretending I was Aryan, acting before my landlady. She didn't realize who I was, and when she used to say in despair, they're bringing in Jews from Holland and other countries, I would try and comfort her and tell her that they were going to Treblinka.
Blackmail and denunciation threatened Jews who tried to live outside the ghetto.
I was very grateful that I had blonde hair and blue eyes. I was very grateful that my Polish didn't have any Jewish accent. Of course, I had to learn all the liturgy because wherever I went, I had to go to church every week. And until today, I am more knowledgeable as far as Catholic religion is than Jewish. And let's say I was grateful at that time for my looks, but I was still, constantly looking over my shoulder because somebody could have spotted. Like one woman once said to me, "Oh, you have such a sad eyes like the Jews." I wasn't afraid of the Germans. I was afraid of the Poles. I was afraid that the Pole will recognize that I'm a Jew. This was my fear the 2.5 years I lived on the false papers.
We by then had 2 categories, as we did before the war also, of anti-Semites, and in Yiddish they were called the Gute Goyim, the good Gentiles. And they were our friends, and we had nothing to lose. What was the alternative? And my father just said, we have no other choice. We will try to go there.
Yafa Eliak's family sought refuge with their Polish neighbor, Kazimierz Korkusz. For more than 3 years, Korkush risked his life sheltering Jewish families on his land. Not all of them escaped arrest.
Моих жидов нарезали в 3 местах. Моих людей выбили.
My Jews were found in 3 different places. They beat up those I'd hidden in my place, and none of them gave me away. None of them told the Germans that I'd hid them there. Nobody named me.
He risked his life. He risked the entire farm, the entire estate, his mother's life. And he was asked, why did he save Jews?
And wasn't it dangerous? But I took pity. I felt upset. Why didn't our people, our Poles, respect other Poles?
Each time when the Jews were killed, it was an event. The people from the vicinity would come to loot and to watch. And Mr. Korkuch, one day, just had his stable boys harness his horse, decorated with bells. And my father and Ita, the other young Jewish woman that was in hiding, they were wondering, it's not a holiday, it's not time to go to church. Why is he all dressed up? And finally, he was asked. And he said, Mishinka, you must understand. When you killed our Lord in Jerusalem, you were lying the streets as he was marched to his death. Now you are being marched to your death, paying for killing Christ, and we are lining the streets and watching you. He was our best friend. He was our savior. He was our protector. And yet, he felt that he has to go to pay that long debt.
According to official reports in the hands of my government, more than 1/3 of the Polish Jews, out of a total of 3,130,000, have already been exterminated. Imagine entire population of large cities, all taken out and shot, exterminated in cold blood.
In the end, the Germans killed approximately 3 million Polish Jews. Fewer than 1 in 10 of Poland's Jews survived the war.
The last we heard about our families is that they went to Treblinka.
The whole family except 3 of us were killed by the Germans. My father and mother, and one of my older sister, and 4 of my brothers.
I had 5 sisters, father and mother. 3 of the sisters were married, their husbands were killed, their children were killed. My brother's wife and 3 children were killed, and I had a girl which I loved very much, she was killed.
A courier for the Polish underground government, Jan Karski, was sent to the West, urgently requesting intervention. His mission included a meeting with the President of the United States.
I got up and I said, Mr. President, I am going back to Poland. Every leader will know. I saw President Roosevelt. Every leader will ask me, what did Roosevelt tell you? Mr. President, what am I going to answer? And then again, I will never forget, even if his accent, you will tell your leaders that we shall win this war. You will tell them that the guilty ones will be punished for their crimes. Justice, freedom will prevail.
Walki w getcie
Fighting in the ghetto.
były spodziewane
was
przez nas.
expected by us all.
Wiedzieliśmy, że
We knew that the young Jews won't stand for it,
młodzież żydowska nie wytrzyma. I tak
and
jak
like
my
us, dreamt of the
marzyliśmy
opportunity of fighting with the enemy.
możliwości walki z nieprzyjacielem, tak tym bardziej
So all the more, the young, idealistic,
ideowi,
and patriotic Jews strove
patriotyczni Żydzi
with all their might
dążyli
to at last
wszystkimi siłami do tego, żeby
stand as
nareszcie
equal to equal.
stanąć jak równy z równym.
Led by the young idealists of pre-war days, the 56,000 Jews who remained in Warsaw's ghetto prepared to fight and die rather than accept their fate. In April 1943, the Germans moved in to liquidate the ghetto.
לכן כאשר הגרמנים נכנסו ערב פסח,
So when the Germans entered on the eve of Passover in 1943, and the Jews were still preparing this Passover,
כיצד
were even thinking how to celebrate this evening,
לחגוג את הערב הזה.
here came the information that the ghetto was surrounded.
את הגטו.
And instead of sitting at this last Passover in the Warsaw ghetto,
בגטו ורשה
in fact, it turned into a rebellion.
להתנגדות.
The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising was the first mass revolt against the Germans in occupied Europe. The Jews fought for 27 days.
הימים האלה שהם הלכו מבית לבית והם
There were days that the Germans went from house to house, and they burnt the buildings and blew them up.
והאש,
And the fire, the heat penetrated the bunkers that were under the ground
לתוך הבונקרים שמתחת לפני האדמה.
and poisoned everything,
הרעיל את הכל. קלקל את האוכל.
ruined the water, ruined the food.
לא היה...
There wasn't any air.
האוויר היה...
The air was boiling, and people were living in a true hell.
אנשים
A true hell.
חיו בגיהנום של ממש. בגיהנום של ממש.
I only could see clouds of smoke from far away, plus the commentaries of my landlord, who was beaming. That is the best thing which could have happened to the Jews.
W getcie paliło się.
In the ghetto, there was burning.
Getto się paliło.
The ghetto was burning.
Ja mieszkałam tak,
I lived in such a place that the smoke from the ghetto was in my flat.
był w moim mieszkaniu. A dym,
And smoke,
w którym
in
płonęły
which human bodies were burning,
ciała ludzkie,
was the most awful thing you can imagine,
czymś najokropniejszym,
if you can imagine
co
it.
można sobie wyobrazić, jeżeli można sobie wyobrazić.
In London, the Bundesleader, Shmuel Ziegelboim, heard the broadcast announcing the massacre of Warsaw's last Jews. A member of the Polish government in exile, he had urged resistance from the start. Now he resolved to take his own life, hoping to shake the conscience of the world. In a final letter, he wrote,
I cannot be silent. I cannot live while remnants of the Jewish people of Poland, of whom I am a representative, are perishing.